welcome to On the Contrary for Week 16. And it is very much silly season in the NFL, but we will do our best to give you guys the best contrarian takes, all the ones that other shows out there, even in Week 16, they still cower in fear and wet their pants even thinking about. I'm Chris Spags, joined as always by the top DFS player in the world, a man who's had a fine showing at the Fantasy Football World Championships, Alex Osmo Baker. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing pretty good, man. This is our real last chance to win some big bucks in fantasy football before the playoffs. So I think it'll be kind of that one shot or opportunity to capture or let it slip. And I'm hoping you guys can give us some advice so we can all capture.
We have to live up to the 8 Mile to Run Rabbit Run and all the things involved therein. Of course, we're going to quote that. But you know what? Another man we are bringing back, which is fun because it feels to me like the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions. We are having some of the best guests back here down the home stretch. We're welcoming back Rich Rebar, better known as Lord Reeves on Twitter. How are you doing, Rich?
What's going on, guys? It's great to be back. I think I was on in week 2, so to come, almost back full circle, 2 weeks left in the season. It's great to be back, and yeah, congratulations on that nice hit in Miami, Alex.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I got lucky as hell. I mean, I was doing okay. I was doing pretty good, but then that Julio touchdown at the end, and the sweat because it was the last play of the last game, pretty much. Man, that was a night to remember.
So I want to ask Rich some stuff about how he's felt about the season. But first, since we're talking about it, Alex, I guess people would be curious, how many lineups did you have in the World Championship and how did you land on the one that you had in there? Because you had some unique plays, Derek Carr at QB, not ways that I would think you'd want to go, but it worked out well for you.
Yeah, I mean, the key to fantasy football, and write this down, is you got to pick the guys that haven't won people any money thus far. So Julio and Derek Carr were like at the top of my list.
Interesting. And how many entries did you have in the tournament overall?
Oh, I had 5 entries. So yeah, that's how I got to some of these plays like Derek Carr. I mean, I think only a couple people had him. So he wasn't the guy that won me the money. But it's kind of, you gotta have a little bit of a unique take on the slate, and that's what we're here for, is giving out the contrarian picks. So I'm looking forward to seeing who you guys' contrarian picks are this week.
Yeah, so congrats to Alex. Of course, we have a lot of fun with these things, but it is a big deal. So shout out to the man. I know it's always nice to prove those concepts in person. But Rich, you're proving a lot of concepts. So you've been covering the NFL all year long. You had some of the best takes we've had, honestly, all season long in terms of our viewer feedback. A lot of people learned a lot from you being on the show last time out. So throughout the season, has there been anything else you've learned or seen? How has the season gone for you overall?
It's gone well. I survived, last week. I had 7 teams left. I had 4 win. I actually had I had a team with Lamar Jackson and Brashad Perriman lose in a season long, which is seems pretty impossible to have happen, but it did. Just no one else played well. But yeah, things are still going well. I mean, Lamar has really carried, so he's done so much of the lifting for me this year. But it's been, a really unique year. We talk about every year that the season is always kind of a snowflake in the NFL, and this year's been kind of like that just as well. I mean, we've had really, and it's really trickled over to DFS. Like, we've really had only a couple locks like per week of the season. It's been Christian McCaffrey, Lamar Jackson, and Michael Thomas. And like, really after that, we've just kind of had pockets of production from different types of players that have kind of come into those secondary spots at different times of the year. But it's really made it, the lineups have been, higher variant. Last year we were at a point in DFS where the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season, we just played Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey in every lineup and let the rest take care of itself and let all our cash come in cash lineups and let that, fund our bankroll. It was really easy. This year we've kind of moved away with Christian McCaffrey being so highly priced like he's been the past several weeks. People creating different lineups. We're not having the overlap in cash that we were having in the front half of the season, which is fun. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a unique year from that sense of not having a lot of just ultimate hammers every week.
It's going to be a unique last few weeks here as well. So one thing you can help yourself out with, all the variance is going to kick in for the NFL in week 16 and 17. It's not paying rake on your DFS sites. You can do that at our presenting sponsor of FantasyDraft.com. Right now, go to FantasyDraft.com and use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for a free 7-day trial over there into the world of rake-free DFS, where all of the contest entry fees go right to the winners. And Alex, we are in the home stretch here this season. How many wings do you think you could have bought with the rake that you've paid across all the DFS sites?
Yeah, so I apologize if anyone from Hooters is watching because I'm really off brand with my pizza here. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is On fantasy draft, when you cash, you win more money. So, 1 week I had a good week on fantasy draft. I finished third, and I won 30,000. First prize was 100,000. On most sites, the payout structure is much more steep. So I would have probably won the 15,000. The extra 15,000 for third equated to 15,000 wings. I don't know if you can tell, but I've been working on that.
Yeah, I heard you're getting into shape now. So pizza and wings definitely sound like the way to do that, especially if you're bulking in particular. It goes right to the muscles. That's what they always say. Much like that goes to your muscles, the money goes right to your pocket at Fantasy Draft. So go check them out right now at fantasydraft.com and use that promo code AWESEMO, or download the Fantasy Draft app in the app store of your choosing. All right, guys, let's get into it because we have a lot of stuff to talk about. We actually have a Saturday slate, which I want to breeze through fast because it's an interesting one. It's one that's a little bit ugly, I guess, for at least a couple of the games, and one that definitely appeals more appealing on paper, Houston at Tampa Bay. So I guess, Rich, I'll ask you first here. Just talking about the slate overall, not going game by game or anything, but what do you feel like the edge is on the slate, if any? Like, what would you do here to try to get different? It seems like Tampa Bay stacks are going to be a bit lower owned than you might think because they are a skeleton crew at receiver. But besides that, is there anything maybe you're seeing that you think other players won't be doing on this 3-gamer for Saturday?
Yeah, it's an interesting slate because obviously everyone's going to want to flock to this first game, especially, with the way the Bucks games have been. I mean, they've had their game, they played the most overs this season, games that are going over the game total. So a lot of people are going to be flocking to that. I mean, obviously I think we're going to see Deshaun Watson be the highest owned, quarterback on the slate because it's really hard to get excited about any other quarterbacks outside of this game. I mean, we've got, Brady and Josh Allen in the middle game, and then Garoppolo and Jared Goff. I mean, unless someone has like a really, hot take of, Jimmy Garoppolo, really, really popping, and there's a chance that could happen, I guess. But I mean, it's going to be really hard to really get Contrarian at quarterback here and really have someone with the kind of upside that either of these two quarterbacks have in this first game. And as a byproduct, the other passing pieces are going to come along with those guys. So, I mean, we're going to see a lot of ownership of DeAndre Hopkins, a lot of ownership on Will Fuller. I mean, when you play these small slates like this, I mean, the key is to not just spread yourself out. Like, don't try to cover every angle. Find the locks, find the leverage plays that you want. Like, believe in what's going to happen and lock those guys in. Sure, 70% of the field might be on DeAndre Hopkins, but if you believe he's the best play, go 100%. Don't be scared to hit a lock button on a guy, on this type of small slate. Because if you end up being locked in on the best plays, I mean, they're going to carry all your other lineups. Usually, like I said, people try to cover too many bases on these small slates and account for everything that can happen. And you can't do that with 150 lineups. You just can't cover everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it does seem like they're, particularly with like a low total game like Buffalo at New England, maybe you don't need those Buffalo stacks with Josh Allen, perhaps not. Much of that pains me to say, but Alex, do you agree with what Rich is saying? Do you find any sort of edge on the slate? And if there is an edge, what do you think it is? Because hard to see one right now based on what we have so far.
So yeah, I mean, there's always an edge because if you can anticipate what everyone else is doing, then you can create strategies around that. This game, Tampa Bay versus Houston, it looks like almost all of the most popular players are all from this game. And we know in football, players in the same game are pretty correlated with each other. So it creates an opportunity where maybe Buffalo and New England on paper looks like the worst game, but just surely based on random chance, that could be the game of the week. So if you can kind of identify some of the spots where people are a little bit lower owned, that's the advantage. And one guy I'll mention is Brashad Perryman. This guy is like one of the highest owned players of the week on Saturday. And his ownership in certain contests may exceed the rate he actually catches the ball. Because up until last week, I mean, he got like 40% of his passes. So it's like, when you have chalk guys that can't catch, that's not a bad situation at all.
It's funny to hear you spell it out like that because in my mind, it's just like, it's Brashad Perriman. He's not the best player, but he's going to be getting the opportunity running outside as the named number one receiver. But you are correct. He still has under a 50% catch rate on the year. Your projection for him is not that great. I guess just fast, Alex, because I know you do have the projections here, and your projection does jump out for Justin Watson out of the Bucks receivers. What would you do with these guys real fast? Is there any lean you have besides, I guess, not Brashad Perriman?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll mention that if you really want to go off the board and pick someone no one will have, this dude, Ishmael Hyman, he's filling in as the third wide receiver, I think, now that everyone else is done with football. So I like him a little bit. I think Justin Watson, Brashad Perryman are they're good plays. Brashad Perryman, the one thing I see, he has 49 targets on 390 routes. That's only 12% of the time. Part of that is because of playing with Evans and Godwin and being in only wide receiver 3 sets. But this is not. That also indicates to me this isn't a guy that really gets open very easily. And combined with his pretty bad hands, I mean, this is a chalk play that is pretty suspect.
Rich, do you have any lean here with the Bucs receivers? Because I do feel like we didn't want to go game by game, but this is one spot that's just so fluid. You saw more targets for OJ Howard and Cameron Brate. The report out of Tampa Bay was that Jameis went to these guys and was like, expect the rock this week, because he knows he's got to throw it to somebody. And we also have the addition, who actually don't think this guy's on the slate, but Cyril Grayson, who's a speedster who's on the Bucs now, apparently maybe in the mix, but I don't believe we'll be able to play him unless DraftKings adds him late. So, Rich, do you have any leans with the receivers here? Would you be willing to go Brashad's way?
I think that the way to play it is to fade Brashad, come under ownership, or just X him out completely if you're off him, just because his ownership's so high. He said he only had 6 targets last week, and he turned 6 targets into 3 touchdowns. If you're gonna ask me if Brashad Perriman can turn 6 targets into 3 touchdowns every week, I'm gonna bang the under on that every time. So the way to play it is go over on Justin Watson, go over on OJ Howard to get your leverage on the field there. 'Cause, I mean, like Alex hit on to open. I mean, the way even with these slates is we still can see what everyone wants to do, projected ownership and stuff like that. So the way to, approach winning these types of tournaments is to leverage what you believe is going to happen and believe against what everyone else believes is going to happen. So everyone thinks Brashad Perriman is the obvious play. And, obviously there's a little bit of point chasing going on there, and they lost Chris Godwin too. So maybe he gets a few more targets, but if he's going to have that higher ownership and he's that inherently of a volatile play anyways, those types of guys, you can always come in and play, use that floor to your advantage, and come under ownership on him. So I definitely think that's the play to take with the Bucs passing game.
There you go. So hopefully that helps for the Saturday slate. It is a difficult one, but use Alex's projections. Those are available. And we do have the Saturday ownership as well right now. Use that promo code Contrarian. You can get half off your first week at awesemo.com/join. All right, so let's talk about the Sunday main slate here. And the first game I want to hit on, it's kind of funny. I have a friend who works for Fox Sports in the college football department. He's doing one game, his first NFL game as a PA. Will be working on Jacksonville and Atlanta. And he's like, oh, it's a meaningless game, but it'll be fun being in Atlanta. This meaningless game might be the most important fantasy game of the week because we have a ton of ownership in here. Jacksonville's run defense is bad, so Devonta Freeman should have some ownership. Julio Jones had 20 targets last week, as Alex mentioned earlier, went nuts against San Francisco. A depleted San Francisco, but still did go nuts. Jacksonville, not anywhere near even that depleted San Francisco in terms of their talent. So, Alex, I'll ask you first, this game, which are the guys you like the most? Are you willing to go to Julio? Do you think Freeman gets the work? And are you trusting a now chalky Leonard Fournette?
Man, there's so much about this game that's interesting. Like the Jacksonville head coach being fired right before it has to be one of the most interesting storylines. But Julio's my bae this week. He came through big last week. He got the 20 targets. That's insane, man. Like that never happens in football. And I just updated my top stacks here, so I'm pulling that up. Atlanta always pops up in that. Right now, Matt Ryan's projected for 8% ownership. I have them as the second most likely sack to go off this week at 11.6. And when you have guys like Julio that are just in spots that are really favorable, with Calvin Ridley being out, I mean, that makes it pretty appealing to me.
Rich, how are you feeling about the Atlanta offense here? And Alex talked about the pass game. So tell me what you think about Julio and also about Freeman, who has shown that he can have big days. Did it a couple weeks ago against Carolina. And I do feel like Carolina is a pretty close comp to Jacksonville in terms of just being a poor run defense.
Yeah, I mean, Devonta Freeman is in a very similar spot to what he was 3 weeks ago, and it feels like there's not a lot of buzz really around him. But, we've seen Jacksonville. They've allowed 118 rushing yards to running backs and 9 rushing touchdowns to running backs over their past 8 games. The one potential hang-up with Devonta Freeman, though, is that since he's come back to the lineup in Week 10, he has none of the 5 backfield carries inside the 5-yard line. So, I mean, if it's he could run to a spot where he can also be bad chalk, even by hitting. I mean, he can hit for 110, 130 total yards, but if he doesn't score a touchdown, I mean, he's not going to pop. it doesn't even matter if he hits some value. If he gets the 2x, 3x, because you need the touchdowns. I mean, you need those touchdowns to have those big ceiling games. So that's one potential hang up, but the spot is very similar. You've got him as a big home favorite again against the run D and a team that is really just, packed it in the Jaguars, while Atlanta is actually playing better since they've come back from the bye week. They seem to be almost like rallying around Dan Quinn a little bit. And they've, especially defensively, they played really well since their bye week. But yeah, I mean, the passing game is really just down to Julio Jones. I mean, you've got Austin Hooper still hanging around, but he hasn't really played the full allotment of snaps that he was prior to his injury. He hasn't in either game. He got up to 82% of the snaps last week. But he's also another one of those guys that is just a low leverage type of tight end play. Like him without a touchdown is sitting in he's like a 9 for 90 as a ceiling play, but more likely like a 6 for 50 type of guy. There's some value with him, especially as pricing, that's dropped on DraftKings. But it really is just all about Julio Jones. I mean, he had 51% of the team targets as the highest share for a wide receiver or any player in a game this season. 20 targets matched his career high. He had 72% of the air yards, which was the most for a wide receiver in a game outside of Stephon Diggs in week 2 when the Vikings only threw like 12 passes. So it almost doesn't even really count. So, I mean, it really just runs through Julio. And, Matt Ryan is pretty interesting too. You can talk about a stacking partner because he's a guy that really carries a high yardage floor typically. And, if he pops, Julio's going to go with him. So that's the way to play it. I mean, on the other side, DJ Shark is going to play, and he's got the Q tag on him. And, we know people don't always like to click the Q tag. His ownership already looks low, probably because it wasn't, he hasn't been guaranteed and cleared to play yet. But he's in a very interesting spot. So the 49ers really chose last week just to throw and pepper George Kittle and not, use the wide receivers like they used them against the Saints. Emmanuel Sanders and D.D. Westbrook Deebo Samuel last week. But the Falcons are still vulnerable at cornerback. I mean, they lost Desmond Trout for the season. They're playing Kendall Sheffield, Isaiah Oliver, and Bleedy Ray Wilson as their 3 cornerbacks. So, I mean, if there's catch-up mode here, DJ Shark has had 10, 9, and 12 targets in his past 3 games played with Gardner Minshew. So, I mean, there's some upside to run it back with DJ Shark, especially because he's shown a guy that has top 10, in his range of outcomes as a ceiling play. So there's potential to run it back too on the Jaguar side.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Chark, too, definitely people who are box score chasing might see that Chris Conley had the big day last week, but still not a player who really got there because of 2 touchdowns in that game. Really wasn't a peppering of targets. So he did get 8 targets in that game, only had 4 catches. People may want to point chase there, but Chark being back in there to me just makes these guys less appealing and makes Chark himself much more appealing. Alex, do you have any lean with Chark this week? And I guess confirmed to me that you might not have a lot of interest in Conley coming off that game with Chark back in the lineup.
Sorry, I was muted. My bad. So I think I'm just gonna repeat myself exactly. So bear with me. Chark being out last week, that elevated the other Jacksonville guys to being core plays. But now that he's back, he's the guy. Especially on certain sites like FanDuel, where he's only 6,200. That's just way too cheap for a guy who's been having the season he's been having. So I think that he makes a nice play as a one-off or part of a game stack.
That was odd because I could hear you. You weren't muted for me. I guess it must be because of the different channels. But yeah, you were muted, but you're good now. So we're okay. Let's keep going through here because we're trying to hit on a lot this week. So we're going to probably go through games a little faster than we may normally. But New Orleans at Tennessee. Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas seem to be 2 of the top owned plays on the slate. The rest of the game, though, looks overlooked. The QBs in particular, both guys going to be under 5%. And Tennessee has shown a penchant for shooting out. Actually, so has New Orleans recently over the last few weeks. It's a spot where I'm really curious about because to me on paper, this looks like a bad Tennessee or a tough Tennessee run defense is going to be a bad matchup for Kamara. The last time he had a similarly bad matchup, though, was that week against Tampa Bay, where he had one of his better fantasy games of the year, actually his best week since, I believe, week 3. He had that game where he had 10 catches or at least 10 targets against Tampa Bay, and maybe that's how they do it again. But Alex, you tell me, how are you feeling about New Orleans offense here and the chalky ownership for Kamara and Michael Thomas?
I really like New Orleans this week. I think that this game versus Tennessee is competitive, and that'll help their chances of being the winning stack because in NFL, you are limited a little bit by how much your opponent puts up. And it's kind of nice that there are only like 2 guys that are really fantasy studs here, and Michael Thomas and Kamara, because the guy's a target, and Jared Cook. I think that I mean he had that big week a couple weeks ago where he got knocked out with a concussion, but that just showed that he's got a huge play potential too. So kind of like the stack.
The pizza catching up with you, Alex. We could feel the heartburn going through over there. Rich, how are you feeling about New Orleans passing attack here? And also Alvin Kamara, who again, going against Tennessee, according to PFF, one of the better run defenses in the league, a 90 run defense grade from them. Are you willing to go to Kamara, or are you just preferring Michael Thomas, Rich?
I mean, Kamara's really cheap on FanDuel. He's the RB17 in pricing there, but it's pretty interesting, the Saints in general. So because of the injury to Drew Brees, it's really happened. He's only played 2 road games so far this season. He's only played 1 game outdoors so far, and that was that game in Tampa Bay. In his 2 road games this season, we've always kind of had these Drew Brees home road splits that have always been kind of in his craw. His 2 games on the road, he's threw for 228 passing yards, 6.5 yards per pass attempt. The other game he threw for 184 yards and 6.1 yards per pass attempt. Outside of all those games at home, he's thrown for 287 yards or more at home. So we kind of are running into a spot that he really hasn't been in. He has also kind of always let us down in the fantasy playoffs. He always typically gives us like one bad game. Hopefully it's not this week, because Tennessee really isn't an imposing matchup. I mean, they've allowed 18.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks over their past 8 games. It looks like they will get Adoree Jackson back for this game, but I mean that really doesn't matter because they only throw to 1 wide receiver, and it's Michael Thomas. He's just 10 receptions short of that all-time single-season record, so we know they're going to get him that. And he could get there just this week. He already has 8 games with double-digit receptions this season. It's the most in a single season ever. The Titans have allowed over 100 yards to 5 of the past 7 wide receiver ones they faced. Obviously, Michael Thomas, you have to pay to play with him like it should be, like it's been. But there's really no one to chase outside in the pass game. It's really Kamara and Jared Cook. And Kamara is in a spot where I think he can catch some more passes, but, we're still chasing that touchdown regression. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3, and he's really hit that touchdown regression for a number of reasons. I mean, one is team regression. The Saints were 29th and 31st in passing touchdown rate over the past 2 years. This year, they're now 3rd at 79%. They have 30 passing touchdowns to 8 rushing touchdowns. So that's kind of oscillated back. Kamara hasn't got the explosive plays, which could be due to his ankle injury. Coming into this year, over 50% of his touchdown runs were from 6 yards or further, when the NFL rate of touchdown runs over the past decade are 63% from 5 yards and in, and 44% from 1 to 2 yards. You're not getting those splash plays. And remember, he hurt that ankle in week 6. He came back in week 10, and since then, he's forced a missed tackle on just 14% of his touches when it was 31% prior. So, I mean, he's lost a little bit of those explosive plays. A couple people have been chasing this regression. I think people are turned off by it. I don't know if we'll see his ownership getting real high because a lot of people have been chasing it and it just hasn't happened. But the Tennessee Titans are 27th in PPR receiving points allowed to opposing backfields. So there's an opportunity here for him to get peppered with opportunities. And even though he hasn't popped and he's not turning in these explosive plays, he's still averaging 17.7 touches per game since he came back to the lineup. I understand that he hasn't won you a lot of money, but it goes back to what Alex said to open. Find the guys that haven't been winning people the money, and he's kind of been one of those guys. He really fits that criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like the closest comp is the Tampa Bay game. And I think there were a lot of things that you said there, Rich, that just things we probably all intuited just watching him, but it's nice to hear the data backing it out with the lack of explosiveness and all that. But yeah, Tampa Bay, 10 targets, 10 catches for 47 yards, which isn't great. Like, those are not fantastic numbers, but he's going to get that Jalen Samuels treatment where you just get the check down routes and has a chance to do something here. That could be a spot where Kamara could have some upside. So I don't mind the idea of going there, though it does look like a lot of ownership for him. One guy we should talk about fast, A.J. Brown in this spot. His price is up now. People won't play him because of that price going up. But 2 out of 3 games, actually, it might be 3 out of 4. I might have just miswrote this. I think it's actually 3 out of 4 of his last games, over 26.5 fantasy points, getting a lot of air yards. He's really the only receiver who's involved. I know people talk about Corey Davis being a pivot, but it's much different roles for A.J. Brown. So, Rich, would you be willing to go to A.J. Brown with his price up and just him being clearly the entire passing game for Tennessee lately?
Yeah, I haven't seen where his ownership was. I figured most people would be on him. I would be almost surprising to hear that he's probably going to be unpopular. If he ends up being unpopular, then that's intriguing because he's just got off the top of my head. It's like he's been winning people money, so people want to keep playing him. He's had over 25% of team targets in 3 of the past 4 games. He's 5th in the NFL in yards created after the catch. the top 4 guys ahead of him all have 28 or more receptions than him so far in the season. So he's good after the catch. I think a real similar player that the Saints faced was 2 weeks ago in Deebo Samuel, who also is a real yak machine. He had 5 catches for 76 yards against them. We've seen some wide receivers put some big games up on the Saints recently. Both those 49ers guys, Calvin Ridley at 8 for 91. The week before the Calvin Ridley game, DJ Moore at 6 for 162 and 2 against them. So we've seen some spike weeks. They're available against the Saints. They'll add Janoris Jenkins into the fold this week too to go with Marshawn Lattimore. But if this game's going to pop, and if Ryan Tannehill's going to pop, I mean, A.J. Brown's probably going to come along for the ride because all the games Ryan Tannehill has hit his ceiling have involved A.J. Brown, kind of really aiding that ceiling.
That's a good point. Alex, how do you feel about A.J. Brown here? Under 7% projected ownership right now on DK. The price is up, so I feel like you're maybe a little bit averse there, but do you see any logic in going to A.J. Brown this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a tremendous play this week. The only question is, I mean, with that salary, there's a lot of great wide receivers in the NFL right now. And I tend to fade the hot streaks because in NFL, wide receiver production is so volatile. In fact, I have A.J. Brown projected for half a touchdown on average, so that means half the time he won't get in the end zone. If he doesn't get in the end zone, you're looking at maybe 15 points if he has a good game. So I think that I'm not that excited about him, but the fact that if he is low owned because of the price, that volatility works in your favor, so I could see you taking some shots.
All right, that makes sense. Let's keep going here. We got a key NFC East game here, one where the Cowboys can, in fact, win the East. Philadelphia cannot win it, but can keep themselves alive for one more week and push it to week 17. Dak Prescott and his pass catchers look like they'll be a top-owned option this week going against Philly's deeply flawed secondary. And Dak also reportedly struggling with some shoulder issues. The reports are saying he might have had them for a while, but it does happen to coincide with a week where he was less involved in the pass game, and Dallas did lead more in the run game last week against the Rams. So, Alex, how are you feeling about Dak's probability here? Because he's been a guy I feel like you've had projected pretty well for most of the year, and most of the times he continues to come through regardless of how the game script goes. Are you willing to go to Dak this week, or do you feel like the shoulder is a risk? Do you have any sort of apprehension with going to Dak and the stacks?
Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful here because that shoulder injury does sound pretty significant. I'm not really an expert, so it'll be hard for me to really gauge that, especially at this point in the week. One factor against Dak is that Amari Cooper's amount of playing time has been kind of a little bit lower than I would have hoped. So that makes me a little down on his chances of being a great play this week. But him and Michael Gallup combined are pretty good options, so that makes the game pretty easy to stack.
Rich, how are you feeling about this Dallas offense here? Do you prefer the pass game, or would you be willing to go back to Zeke with them leaning on him perhaps a bit more down the stretch run here, with them just trying to get into the playoffs any way they can?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a spot to really love them. Just this shoulder injury throws a little kind of, rain cloud over things. We know Dak's going to play. I mean, they've at least said that much. So the only thing is, how effective is he going to be? Does the Toradol kick in? Is he able to let it fly? Because, the rumor was at the end of last game that, he was in the huddle literally telling his wide receivers he couldn't throw the football, which is pretty scary. But, I mean, objectively, it's a great spot for him. He's coming off of a 4-game stretch where he faced 4 teams in the top 8 in expected points added via their pass defense. Now he's getting a team that's 22nd. Against the Eagles, a team we've targeted all year. And he's run hot against the Eagles. He's had over 20 fantasy points against the Eagles in their past 3 matchups he did earlier this season. It's a good spot. It would be a good spot to really stack this game. If there's a realm of possibility that he's not 100% though, and they really have to ride Zeke, I mean, Zeke has gotten it going. He's coming off a season high 160 yards from scrimmage. He's got back-to-back games with 2 touchdowns. The Eagles are one of these good run defenses, so people don't like clicking it because it's got one of the red numbers, next to the matchup. But Zeke has absolutely roasted the Eagles over his career. He's rushed for 96 or more yards in all 5 of his career games against the Eagles. He's had 141 or more yards from scrimmage in all 5 of those games as well. So if you've got some tournament potential where his ownership's going to be down, I don't know what it is right now. But if there's potential to get some leverage on that where people are just scared of the matchup and you can play into the the Dak injury a little bit and come that route. There's some upside there that he's shown, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise. And maybe this scares people off of the Cowboys passing game, and you've got some leverage to gain that route because, like I said, the matchup's great for Dak. The Eagles are last in the league in points allowed to boundary receivers. So, I mean, you've got Michael Gallup and Amari, in spots where they should be able to get over matchup wise. So maybe the ownership ends up falling here, as we approach Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. The Zeke ownership right now, as Rich mentioned, it's not that high, under 12% right now, which puts him in line with the rest of the Dallas players, but you're certainly getting some leverage on the stack there through the ownership going pretty comparably to both Cooper and Gallup. So maybe there is some potential for Zeke in that spot going against a tough run defense, but if they're committed to the run and if your quarterback can't throw, that's usually not the best thing. As David Blau has shown us, it's not a good thing when your quarterback can't throw. The Philadelphia side, though, also some consolidated opportunity there with no wide receivers left besides Greg Ward, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and I'm getting somebody on my sheet named Robert Davis, who I don't know who that is until seeing his name pop up right now, but he'll be in the mix. But to me, it looks like a Zach Ertz spot. People may be tempted by Miles Sanders as well after he went nuts last week. So, Rich, I'll keep it with you here. What on the Philadelphia side appeals the most to you? Do you like the Ertz part? Do you like the run game? Or you want to go back to Greg Ward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to be drawn to Ertz. If you look at just his splits with Alshon Jeffrey out of the lineup or games he was forced to leave early because he really only played a combined, I think, 18 snaps in weeks 2, and then that game he was forced out of a couple weeks ago. He's had double-digit targets in all 5 of those games. He's averaging 23.6 PPR points per game. And then the Cowboys are 30th in receptions allowed to opposing tight ends. Kind of really easy to get there with Zach Ertz as the run back. I am a little worried about the Eagles in general because they've just played 3 of the worst 4 teams in the NFL, and they've barely gotten by. I mean, they lost outright to the Dolphins. They gave us fantasy goodness in that game, but they had to go force overtime against the Giants before winning, and they needed a last-minute drive against the Redskins to pull out that game. I know that they ended up getting that touchdown at the last play of the game defensively, but this is a team that has really struggled, and they're eking these wins out against very bad teams, but the Cowboys are kind of one of those teams that, are way worse matchup objectively than what they've had on the docket, and they really haven't been popping. I think Greg Ward's interesting. I mean, he was real interesting at min price last week. He's just typically not the archetype of receiver I like to play in fantasy football unless they are min priced. I mean, he's kind of in that D.D. Westbrook mold, like that 7 for 60. Like if he doesn't score a touchdown, you're not looking at a high ceiling and like a really high floor of points. As like a pure slot guy. And then Miles Sanders he's coming off, like I said, games where he faced the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Redskins, who are all bottom 3 teams, in terms of rushing points allowed per game for fantasy. And Dallas is 10th in yards per carry allowed to running backs, 10th in yards from scrimmage allowed to running backs. Just not as good of a spot for him as well. So, I mean, I'm a little more cautious on the Eagles side. The only guy I think that has a lot of safety is Zach Ertz, which maybe means you want to fade that and go a different direction. But he's really the only guy I feel that is real safe on the Eagles side.
Yeah, Zach Ertz over 10 targets in 4 out of his last 5 games as well. The only game that he was down was the game that he was questionable with that hamstring issue where Alshon Jeffrey went nuts. As Rich mentioned, no Alshon out there. So I think Ertz to me looks like as Rich mentioned, one of the safest plays on the slate, but one I think that could have some upside here, especially if Dallas does pull ahead in the ways that they can. Alex, how are you feeling about Philadelphia here? Do you like Miles Sanders too, or do you want to go to the pass game, or do you just want none of these parts?
Yeah, I'm pretty tepid in my interest here. I think Miles Sanders pretty well priced, good spot because Jordan Howard continues to be out. He's seeing the lion's share of the work over Boston Scott. And the fact that their wide out crew is so banged up, maybe he picks up another target. But the rest of the team, it's hard to love Carson Wentz because he just hasn't been getting it done this year, less than 7 yards per attempt, and especially with the crew banged up, I don't think he'll even be as good as his season number. So I've kind of docked him there. So I'm looking at guys that are a little bit too expensive here for my taste.
Interesting. All right, yeah. So we'll see how it goes for Philly this weekend. But talk about a team that could use Janoris Jenkins too in the secondary. That would have been one that probably wanted to play for a team that was more in contention. But geez, they could have bring in anybody there, and it's probably an improvement. Let's keep going through these games here. Arizona at Seattle. Last week, Chris Carson saw a massive workload with no Rashad Penny, 24 carries for 133 yards, and a really good spot for him as well. Is he worth paying up for again here, Alex? I'll ask you, because Seattle's pass game here could be equally appealing. That Arizona's secondary brutal on the year, giving up almost 300 passing yards a game. Are you willing to take the high price for Carson, or do you want to go to the pass game, Alex?
Well, I think the pass game is pretty interesting, but Carson certainly, when he is playing in the backfield without Penny, that's a recipe for huge touches. The price on DraftKings and FantasyDraft is quite high, so I don't think he'll stand out because he just doesn't get a lot of passes. So not a great fantasy, not a good enough player to really be a 8,500 kind of guy. But I like the passing game. Seattle's projected for 30 points. I mean, Arizona is a pretty bad defense, and they play fast. So there is a question mark whether Arizona can put enough fight up for them to have to pass the ball a lot. But I kind of like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett just because pretty effective players, and I think that it's a little bit harder to find value on the slate this week. So going to a guy like DK Metcalf at 5,900 or 11.6 on FantasyDraft is a little bit easier to fit in.
Rich, how are you feeling about Seattle here? Would you prefer Carson or the pass game? Is anybody jumping out to you at all here?
Yeah, I mean, we like to play guys against Arizona. Like we love to target Arizona, and you talk about with Rashad Penny inactive. The past 3 games with Rashad Penny inactive, Carson's had 25, 28, and 26 touches. These are the spots where I'm most hesitant on Russell Wilson, when he's chalky, and then 2 when they're huge favorites. Because we've seen them before. When they get up and they cruise, they like to down throttle and just lean on the running game, and they don't really care about pushing the gas pedal and let Russell Wilson kind of go nuts. You look when they're huge favorites. Seattle's been favorites by more than 5 points in 4 games this season. In those games, he's averaging 9.6 yards per pass attempt. Amazing. That's what Russell Wilson does. But he's averaged just 23.5 pass attempts per game in those games, with 2 or fewer touchdowns in all 4 of those games. That includes a QB 17, 14.3 scoring week against the Cardinals in week 4. Seattle went up 20-3 in that game. In the second half, Russell Wilson threw just 12 passes. He actually completed them all too. He was 12 of 12. But they don't care. They don't care about us. They don't care about fantasy points. They don't care about blowing teams out like they should. That's just not the Seattle way. They're completely content. So I always get nervous when Russell Wilson's in like this objectively great spot and he's chalky and he's like over 8K. Like he is, on FanDuel, and he's a top 5 price quarterback at DK. Like it's really hard because he's shown to have a low floor in these spots, and it's not by his own doing. He's tearing it up. It's that the coaching staff kind of unshackles him. So if Arizona doesn't do their part, we don't get that back and forth, symmetry. It could be a game where Russell Wilson really lets down at that price because he's done it all year in these spots. So, I mean, a little bit scary. If they do get over, I mean, I would lean towards, just Lockett just based on, how many routes he runs in the slot compared to DK Metcalf and how bad Arizona's been, in guarding wide receivers from the slot. And, he probably has a little more potential to have a 100-yard game and hit those bonuses than DK does, where DK is more of you're playing him for the touchdown juice. He's second in the NFL in end zone targets. That's why we play him. I would lean there. And then obviously, people are going to want to circle Jacob Hollister this week. Mm-hmm. How can we leave him out with the Arizona Cardinals? The flow chart, as people like to call it, they're allowing the league high 71.3 yards per game to opposing tight ends. They've allowed 15 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. Even last week, Ricky Seals-Jones got him for the revenge game, even though nobody was playing Ricky Seals-Jones. The problem with Hollister is that he's like very Jack Doyle-ish. Like he doesn't offer a lot of upside. He's averaging just 8.2 yards per catch over the past 4 games. Just doesn't really do a lot of his own. If he doesn't catch a pass in the end zone, he's probably not going to run to the end zone. But Arizona has let a lot of tight ends catch passes in the end zone this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask about him because I felt like we had to, but Alex, close the loop on Jacob Hollister. Is he somebody you'd play at all at a fairly reasonable price? And the fact that Ricky Seals-Jones, again, not a big day there, but still 2 touchdowns is more than enough to make him viable.
Yeah, I think that Jacob Hollister is a good play. It's mostly because there aren't a lot of great tight end plays on the slate. It's a good spot for Seattle. So he's standing out to me. And it's always nice to get a guy on a team that's projected to do really well, because that presumably means more touchdowns, and that's really how you're going to get there with Hollister.
Yeah, I think that all checks out for me. And I guess we have to ask this question. Kenyon Drake, monster game last week at a spot where, it did seem like Cleveland has not been good versus the run on the year. Seattle also not great versus the run on the year, giving up over 4.6 yards per rush. A decent run defense grade from PFF, but certainly not a good one. So, Alex, would you point chase Kenyon Drake at all this week in a divisional game here against Seattle?
If we're just going off of is he a good play, I think he's fine. He's not going to stand out a ton. Just like last week, I didn't think he was a great play last week. Of course, he's absolutely crushed. Sometimes weird stuff happens in football. His price didn't go up a lot because I think the pricing was released before that game. So I think he's fine. He makes a lot of sense if you have Wilson to run it back with Drake. But not the guy that gets me the most excited because his team isn't very good, and the competition for snaps is a little bit higher than some other spots.
Rich, do you have any love for Kenyon Drake with the fact that he put up the full Al Bundy last week with 4 touchdowns?
Yeah, I mean, I just agree with Alex. He's a fine play, but you can't chase that. He had 4 rushing touchdowns over his 23 previous games before having 4 last week. So hard to really chase that. But I agree, he's just a fine play, but it's not going to stand out. If you want to get real contrarian, you could play a Cardinals receiver because they haven't caught a touchdown pass since November 17th.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Christian Kirk really had that one nice game, and now he's hanging out and just enjoying life, the spoils of being the Cardinals' top dog. But also one guy worth pointing out, too, because he may pop for people in box scores, Damiere Byrd had a big day, but it was largely because of a 50-yard catch and run there. So I would definitely not point chase that one in particular. A very short target guy who happened to have one outlier play. Let's keep going through these ones as fast as we can. We got Oakland at the Chargers. Chargers project as a top stack for you, Alex, in week 16, while Melvin Gordon also looks like he'll be highly owned at a cheaper price than Austin Eckler. So, Alex, who do you trust in this game? And also tell me about DeAndre Washington, who should be getting the workload with no Josh Jacobs out there for this week.
Yeah, I think DeAndre Washington is definitely the best value play of the week. He's a guy that just makes everything work. And I noticed this week there's not much value on the slate. So going to him makes a lot of sense. Going to be very popular, I'm sure. But actually, I do really like the Chargers stack. Man, these LA teams are getting me mixed up.
The Clippers look great too.
The Clippers stack. We'll have to wait a couple days for that one, but it'll be good. So I think that this is an example of the guys that haven't won people money a lot. So Keenan Allen, we know that he is a good player. He's got good per game numbers, but he hasn't really had a performance that has been a GPP winner. His highest this year was 21. And his price reflects that. He's only 6,300 on DraftKings. Pretty cheap on all the sites. So I think that stack is really appealing. And we know Oakland has a pretty weak pass defense.
Rich, how do you feel about the Chargers pass game here? And also, do you have any lean about Hunter Henry and why he's been less involved in the last few weeks? Is it just Keenan Allen and Mike Williams absorbing the production? Or I guess who are the guys you like the most in this Chargers pass game, if anybody?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like this passing game a lot. I mean, I was hoping that we were going to see, it sounds like people are on Rivers. I was hoping it wasn't going to be the case, but I think his price is just so low that he keeps popping for people in models because it's a really good spot for him, especially because he let down in primetime against the Raiders. In that Thursday night game, he threw the 3 picks. It kind of has been since that game, he's kind of torpedoed. He's thrown 3 or more interceptions in 3 of his past 5 games. But it's still a good spot to go back to. I mean, the Raiders are still like a team we're going to target, throughout the past. They allowed Gardner Minshew to get there, even with some garbage production last year. They're allowing 19 passing points per game. That's 29th in the league. They've allowed 32 touchdown passes. That's 30th. Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit upon it. So Mike Williams is kind of like taken a little bit of a rise, which is kind of, had some symmetry to, Hunter Henry kind of dipping. I mean, Williams has been a top 30 scorer each of the past 3 weeks. He's got 20% of the team targets after he had just 13.5% of the team targets over the previous 5 games when Hunter Henry came back. And he's just running so hot in efficiency, almost like in a Tyler Lockett type fashion, where he's not getting a ton of targets, but 26.8 yards per catch over his past 7 games. and he's had 4 fewer catches in all those games. It's kind of like how we lived with Tyler Lockett a year ago, if you remember, like during the back half of the season. But the Raiders allowing 4.7 pass plays of 20 or more yards per season. That's tied for the most in the league. That kind of has some symmetry to where Mike Williams gets his targets. I totally agree with Keenan Allen, at least for his volume. His price matches his output, but it doesn't match his volume. And he started to get there the past couple weeks. I mean, he's had 83 yards, 99 yards the past 2 weeks. So eventually he's going to hit for one of these ceiling games. I mean, this is as good a spot as it can. He had 11 targets in these teams played in week 10. I just think he's too cheap. He fits a lot of things to play. But I love the stack. And Melvin Gordon's price is just insane everywhere. I mean, he's priced as the RB20 or lower on all 3 sites, Yahoo, FanDuel, and DraftKings, all the main ones. It's just real hard to get away from because, I mean, he roasted the Raiders the last time that they played. He's a huge home favorite attached to a high team total. Just going to be real hard to avoid him at that cost.
Alex, do you have a lean with a chalky Melvin Gordon? Is there any logic in going to Eckler, given the fact that Eckler's higher priced, but you do have him projected a decent bit better? And he certainly can take that work from Gordon if Gordon doesn't quite get the big results right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they're both good plays. Eckler, he's a really unique player because he's just like had such crazy numbers in the passing game. I actually had to dock it a little bit because it looked a little bit like unsustainable, but he's catching more than 80% of his passes, more than 10 yards per catch. So that those are just lights out numbers. He gets targeted a lot when he's on the field. He's a little bit of a game script play, but in a GPP, that's totally fine. And I think the price is affordable, so I like it.
All right, so it should be a game that has some production there, and maybe ownership not the craziest, but still going to have some ownership on those guys on the Charger side in particular. Let's go to Cincinnati at Miami. I think there's really one guy in particular we need to talk about here. Joe Mixon has been on an insane heater, getting a lot of work, even at over 130 yards and 21 fantasy points against New England. New England's run defense certainly not as good as the pass defense there, but the fact that he was able to get that done despite a game script that didn't fully benefit him, and just the fact that it's Cincinnati, this run blocking offensive line has looked better over the last few weeks. Rich, how do you feel about Joe Mixon here? Because to me, he looks underappreciated in this run that he's been on. I mean, if you're giving Joe Mixon work, he's going to get you results, especially if the line is at least, teetering on competence. And Cincinnati has, to their credit, teetered on competence of late, at least on the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, the left side of that line got healthy, and it's made a difference, and they've actually just stuck with using Joe Mixon, where his touches were just way down. I mean, since they've come back from the Week 9 bye, he's second in the NFL in touches, and he's second in yards from scrimmage behind Christian McCaffrey. And then he's done this over a stretch that you kind of alluded to. He's had matchups against the Steelers, the Jets, and the Patriots, who are all top 10 in rushing points allowed per game to running backs. The Dolphins are 28th in yards per scrimmage running backs. It's just an easy spot to say, like, all right, there's symmetry in the matchup. And the amount of volume he's getting to hit, against the Dolphins. I mean, they resurrected the ghost of Saquon Barkley last week, so we could get some Joe Mixon to pop here. And because Joe Mixon has been so kind of meandering all throughout the course of the season, had that awful start to the season, his price isn't priced up to the kind of volume he's getting, he's on any of the sites. So you're able to pay down a little bit and get that kind of workload that some of these other backs are getting. You still would like to see him used more in the receiving game, not quite getting there in that capacity. But yeah, he's just an objectively really sound play in terms of matchup and value. And then if we end up getting this weather coming in where the passing games are going to be depressed, like a lot of people are projecting, that only, inflates him a little bit more.
You're reportedly going to be pretty windy in Miami, so maybe that changes. Andy Dalton throwing in a windy day can certainly be an issue. Alex, how are you feeling about Joe Mixon here? Or do you want to go to Andy Dalton maybe and be contrarian? Because Mixon's ownership is on the rise, and I imagine it'll probably keep going up because he objectively just looks like a really good play.
I mean, you gotta love Cincinnati and Miami as a perfect DFS game where you got the 2 worst teams basically playing each other, and they're gonna make each other look good. So I think that Mixon is a good play. The price isn't like a steal by any means, but definitely a favorable spot for him. But the guy I'm really keying in on here is Alex Erickson. I think that, so we got Auden Tate out for the year. And John Ross is kind of coming back from injury, but not playing a full workload yet. So that's leaving a big opportunity for Alex Erickson. And he's not a great player by any means, but he's cheap. He's only 3,300 on DraftKings, 6,800 fantasy draft, and I think that there's only maybe like 3 or 4 guys that are below 4K that I'd even consider this week. So I think that he makes a really, really nice value play, especially given that the box score looks horrible, and I feel like people are going to hesitate to click him.
Alex, how about Miami side? Patrick Laird chalk week did not go very well for a lot of people. Ended up close to a 50-50 split with Myles Gaskin there. And it is a good situation going against Cincinnati's run defense. They're giving up almost 160 rushing yards per game. It seems like a spot where one of these guys could find production. Are you willing to go back to Laird, or would you be taking a stab at Gaskin as a value play?
Well, I think Laird is the better play by far because he is a guy that gets targeted a lot. And those are more valuable than the touches on the ground. So I think his price has gone up a little bit, so he's not a steal, but I like Laird. And the other guy I'm really looking at is Albert Wilson because there have been a bunch of injuries to the Miami wideouts, and he's been kind of seeing more snaps. And he's another guy that's just really cheap, and he'll make your lineup work.
Rich, any love for anybody on Miami's side? Maybe Devontae Parker, given that he's still getting a pretty good workload as well, but hasn't had the massive results of late.
I mean, he's still popping. I mean, he had just had that one bad game where he came out of, due to concussion. I mean, last week he still had 2 touchdowns. Still probably underpriced, based on the type of target value he gets. But I mean, it's a tricky spot if we end up with this game not, being played in like a hurricane, like people are saying. It's interesting because the Bengals look good from a raw stance against wide receivers. They look like they're good, but it's only because they're a terrible real team. And they're just getting boat raced every game. I mean, they've trailed for 72% of their snaps. It's the highest rate in the NFL. And teams just down throttle. They don't have to throw against them. They face the second fewest pass attempts in the NFL. And as a byproduct of that, have faced the second fewest targets to wide receivers. So they don't give a lot of raw points to wide receivers, but they're 23rd in fantasy points allowed per target to wide receivers. And they're 28th in yards per target allowed to wide receivers. And they give up big splash plays, and they do give them up. 21.9% of completions they've allowed this season have gone for 20 or more yards. That's 31st in the league. And Devontae Parker is 4th in the NFL in terms of fantasy points generated on targets 15 yards or further downfield and downfield targets. So if the wind holds up and if the weather holds up, I mean, there is an opportunity for him. We just need to scope that out, see if it's something we can really take a bite on. But I agree, with Alex. I mean, Albert Wilson got that big run last week. We know he's got yak potential. He can be a play even if the weather's bad because the types of targets he gets where it would hurt, more downfield targets. And probably the other guy in this game, too, that if the weather holds is Tyler Boyd, just to look at where he's priced on both sites. So the Dolphins have just had a rash of injuries on the back end. And last week they had to sign 2 guys off of other teams' practice squads just to play. They had to sign Lindell Stevens off the Seahawks practice squad to play left cornerback, and they had to say Nate Brooks off the Patriots practice squad to play cornerback for them as the first snaps those guys had played all year. It's part of the reason why all the Giants receivers kind of got over a little bit. And then Jamal Wiltz, their slot corner who they still have, is 107th out of 124 qualifying corners at Pro Football Focus who plays in the slot where Tyler Boyd will be. And Tyler Boyd's, he's a guy been getting 21% of targets since Dalton's come back. So he's a guy if the weather holds as well, is probably supremely, undervalued in terms of just pricing, opportunity, and then match up with the Dolphins just really running out a skeleton crew on the back end.
All right, so maybe some things to watch there weather-wise for sure, but definitely some plays that could be unearthed in this spot. We're running low on time here, so I'm going to just breeze through a couple of the ones, and I guess Alex and Rich, if you guys have any of these that pop up to you or any ones that we haven't hit on, but to me, Baltimore, Cleveland, Lamar Jackson's price being up still obviously looks good, but at $8K on DraftKings, it seems like a tough price to pay. The Giants at Washington, another game too, maybe good for DFS because the defenses are so bad. And Dwayne Haskins, the bane of many existences, had his best fantasy day of the season last week, going for 20 fantasy points. Maybe he's got upside here. And another high-priced guy in Carolina, Christian McCaffrey, got back on track. Will Greer starting. He's coming, I feel like on Twitter, he's been a bit of a hipster DFS pick because he's so cheap and maybe he sucks less than he did in the preseason. But Alex, all these games or any of the ones we haven't hit on, does anything jump out to you that you feel like is worth bringing on the contrary?
I mean, you had me at hipster DFS play because that's totally my brand. So I'm going to be on Will Greer for sure.
He's cheap. Who knows?
Man, there's a lot of rough games here, honestly. I mean McCaffrey versus Indiana, like maybe that's the guy I'll have a lot of, but I don't see much, man. Rich, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games are interesting. Will Greer and his impact on that game in totality is going to be really interesting. On the other side, I mean, interesting. Marlon Mack is, obviously in that spot that we have the Arizona versus tight ends. Well, Carolina's kind of become that versus running backs. Like we just kind of peek at the schedule, like, well, who's playing Carolina this week? We talked about it with Devontae Freeman. Even a guy like Devontae Freeman had his only rushing touchdown of the year against Carolina. Marlon Mack, since he's come back from injury, has faced the second and third ranked run defenses. Not only the second, third ranked run defenses, he's faced them as a road dog. Now he's a home favorite against he's a 7-point home favorite against the worst rushing defense in the NFL. So, I mean, there's probably an opportunity for there. I wish his price was a little cheaper on all the sites because he just doesn't catch enough passes to have a stable floor without a touchdown. So he's really only a GPP play because he could even if he rushes for 125 yards and doesn't score a touchdown, you're still left holding the bag because he's not going to catch any passes. He has 2 catches over his past 6 games. But, home favorite spot, it's pretty good for him. I actually think that my contrarian QB play is Dwayne Haskins because a lot of people are going to go down to Will Greer at 4,300, but Haskins is only 47. He had 19 fantasy points last week. He had 18 fantasy points against the Jets when they played earlier in the year. So he has shown some streaming ability in these spots. And the Giants have allowed a top 12 quarterback scoring week to 7 consecutive quarterbacks, and in 9 of their past 10 games. That includes some guys that we typically pick up in these streaming types of spots, like Ryan Fitzpatrick got him for 20.5 points. Mitchell Trubisky got him for 19 points. Sam Darnold for 22 points. So there is a little bit of, I think, a value with Dwayne Haskins because no one wants to play Dwayne Haskins. I mean, I don't even want to play him really. But convince myself that he is a good, at that price, worth a look. I think that game has game stacking potential because I think Washington's defense is a solid play this week against a team that's turned the ball over more per drive than any other team in the NFL. With Daniel Jones coming back, even the spirit of Adrian Peterson looks okay. He's been getting a ton of volume in Bill Callahan's games since Bill Callahan took over and without Darius Geis. And then Saquon looks way under-owned so far to start the week, especially after he hit last week. Saquon's now faced 4 teams in the bottom 10 in rushing points allowed per game. And against all those teams, he's popped. 17 points against Arizona. Last week he had 30.5 points. He had 15 PPR points against the Packers, and then 28.3 PPR points against the Detroit Lions. So when he's had these soft matchups, he's hit. And Washington just allowed 172 yards to Miles Sanders. And they just the week before that allowed 192 yards to Aaron Jones. So, I mean, we know Saquon's going to get the usage. He seems way under-owned looking at initial ownership right now. And I hope that holds. I hope he stays around 10% because it feels pretty wild.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on any of that? Rich bringing a lot to the table last minute, but I agree on the Haskins stack. It was something that Laffy and I landed on our strategy show on Wednesday. Terrifying thought, but the Saquon thing too. I mean, just not owned, just prices up, but the matchup's good. So, Alex, what do you think about this game before we go to the contrarian plays?
Man, I'm a little bit worried that Barkley's uptick in performance was largely due to Eli being the quarterback instead of Daniel Jones. I feel like Daniel Jones does take some of the usage away from Barkley, both because he runs the ball more and he also doesn't pass as much to running backs because he can scramble. So I think that Saquon is he's priced fine, but not really standing out a ton to me. So the contrarian game of the week for me is the Detroit at Denver. The Detroit at Denver. Yeah, I think that it's full of these dudes who are filling in, like didn't start the year, and I don't think anyone's going to be on that game, so it'll be kind of interesting.
Interesting. I really, having played David Blau last week and then watched that game, he looks just like he's shelled back there. He looks like he went through Vietnam in the backfield. And when he's out there, he just looks like a third string QB who shouldn't be playing. So going against Denver on the road terrifies me, but you are the man, Alex. So I'll take that to the bank. Let's go through our contrarian QB picks. And Rich, I guess you already hit yours, but do you want to stick with Dwayne Haskins officially?
Yeah, I will. I'll just stick with old Dwayne there.
All right. Look, I like it. I'm with you. I was going to do it too. So I'm glad you did instead of me, Rich. Alex, how about you? Contrarian QB pick.
I'll go with Drew Lock. He's been decent since he's been starting for the Denver Broncos. Matchup versus Detroit is favorable. I think that there will be some question whether Detroit can put up the points to hang in this one. But I really like that Cortland Sutton gets a large share of the work because that makes it easy stack.
All right. And yeah, without Haskins, I guess I'll take stupid Will Greer and just hope that the talent there carries him to a decent day. Very possibly could just have a 3-touchdown day passing to Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore with low effort throws. So I'll take that stab a little bit this week. Not a guy I'm terribly confident. I agree. I'd rather go to Haskins too. Alex, how about you? Contrarian running back pick.
For some reason, I decided to look for my contrarian wide receiver first.
Too enthusiastic for your wide receivers. I get it.
Man, I always honestly have trouble finding the contrarian running backs because it seems like the running back ownership is pretty well distributed every week. But one guy that's standing out a little bit is James Conner. He didn't get as much work as you would hope in his first game back from injury. Matchup versus the Jets is below average for running the ball, but not bad for receiving it. So this would be a spot where it's kind of like you're hoping James Conner becomes more of the workhorse, and he just is undervalued for the situation he's in.
Rich, who would be your contrarian running back pick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this running back ownership, and I want to like bring something spicy. I had Dwayne Haskins, but I'm looking at this too, and it's really hard. It's really hard to the best player that is priced cheaply, because I think that there are, like I said, I think Saquon, if his ownership holds, will be underowned. If Marlon Mack's ownership holds, I think he'll be underowned. Like saying the guy facing the Panthers isn't contrarian. I guess like 1.5-2% Nick Chubb is like the best dude, I guess, that you could say, just because he's had 92 yards from scrimmage in each of his past 6 games. That's with Kareem Hunt playing. The matchup's terrible. He's a 10-point dog. I don't expect him to repeat his 185-yard 3-touchdown game that he had against the Ravens the first time, but they are allowing just under 5 yards per carry to running backs over the past 3 games. I wish I could do better, man. It's just I think that it's really spread out. I think that guys are better plays than Nick Chubb, but I wanted to at least bring up a guy that had projected low ownership.
Well, you know what, Rich? I'll one-up you with an even less courageous pick and take Marlon Mack, because we have him at 6%. That's close enough to me, and it is hard. This part of the contrarian picks is hard, but for all the reasons you outlaid, like if Mack's ownership doesn't get above 10%, just because people are afraid of the lack of PPR upside, this is a 2-touchdown spot for him. It seems like Carolina giving up a 7% rushing TD rate, and Mack's still getting that work. Maybe he has one more game before they shut him down for the year, because why would you crowd him out there at this point? But yeah, I'll take Mack for mine. And Rich, close us out with your contrarian wide receiver.
Well, I already brought up DJ Shark, so I'll just bring up a tight end to stick with Alex. I'm going off script. I'm going contrarian on the contrarian pick. I'm going to go follow Alex's QB picks. I also think Cortland Sutton's a good play, but I'm going to say Noah Fant. So what Noah Fant's been is he's not getting a ton of targets, but he's been like a huge play machine. So he has a reception of 30 yards or more in 4 of his past 6 games. Since Drew Lock's taken over as a quarterback, he has the highest average depth of target on the team, even higher than Cortland Sutton's. The Lions are allowing they're 27th in yards per target allowed to tight ends, and they are tied with the Raiders in last in the league in amount of 20-yard pass plays allowed per game. So I'm going to go with Noah Fant as the stack, while people will stack him with Sutton.
Hey, people just seem to fall off of him when he's running those big plays. He's broken a lot of big touchdowns, so not crazy. Alex, how about you, contrarian wide receiver?
I mentioned him a little bit, Albert Wilson. This is a guy who also was one of my beer goggles picks, so not usually a good pick, I have to say, but he played 57 of 71 snaps last week. That was by far the most he's played as a percentage, because most weeks he'd been hovering around 50%. And that was encouraging enough sign that he's now the second wide receiver in Miami. Of course, coming back from a big injury at the start of the year, it's taking him a while to come back, but I guess he's fully back. And to last year, we got kind of a glimpse of what he can do. so I'm willing to take some shots at him until my bankroll is completely depleted.
I'm going to go to Terry McLaurin. We have him at 5% flat. And we talked about the Haskins stuff. McLaurin can single-handedly make a good day for Haskins, as we saw last week, just breaking a big play with guys who should have been able to tackle him. And he just ran away from him full speed. So living up to the F1 nickname. And then, of course, the last thing we have, guys, hit the like button. We can do the fade of the week in a second, but the fade of the week is only as good as the amount of likes we get. So please hit that, whatever platform you're on, because we are on Twitch, Periscope, and YouTube right now. And also shout out FantasyDraft, of course, the official home of free DFS. Go check them out with the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial. All right, Alex, fade of the week for week 16. Who is it going to be?
Man, this is I'm looking at the list of the top 1 players. It's all the guys I like the most. So that's
you chalk donkey, you.
Yeah, you're right. What am I even doing playing? But I mean, I'll just take a stand since I don't hate any of these guys. I'll just go with Michael Thomas. I think that, I love the New Orleans stack, but there's so much variation in how wide receivers do. I'm a little bit worried about this 10 catch incentive, because if he gets 10 catches, you'll probably be in trouble if you don't have him. But the matchup isn't great. There's Tennessee. The price is as high as any wide receiver has been this whole year. So I don't think you're getting a huge advantage by going to him.
Rich, how about you? Who'd be your fade of the week?
Let's see. Looking at ownership, it stinks because this guy's been bad, but his ownership always stays high. I guess I'll still say Leonard Fournette. So the thing about Leonard Fournette is he's basically Le'Veon Bell now. And no one's noticed because the team has been so bad and he's had no shot on the ground. Over the past 6 weeks, he's only averaging 3.3 yards per carry. They get game scripted out of every game, so they can never stay with the run. He's just been catching a few more passes, but he just is per touch and per target. He's basically is Le'Veon Bell. They're the Spider-Man meme, but their gap in ownership is always really low and their gap in rankings is always really cavernous. But the Jaguars have just really hurt Leonard Fournette. But I know everyone's still chasing that touchdown regression from him.
Yeah, I was actually also thinking Uncle Len too for the same reason. So I'm glad you're making me feel better about my asshole picks this week, Rich. So I appreciate that very much. I'm gonna go. All right, yeah. I guess I will say, boy, man, it's tough when you lose it. Le'Veon Bell still has enough ownership where I'll say I don't want to go there. We have him over 12% right now, almost at 13. It was higher earlier in the week, but revenge narratives in football, not ever a thing I'm dying for, but a revenge narrative on a team with a bad offensive line going against a Steelers team who really gets great pressure over and over again. And Adam Gase too doesn't seem like a guy who cares about Le'Veon Bell's happiness at all and is going to feed him the rock in a way that matters. So I would not be on Le'Veon Bell this week, despite his lowered price, and he'd be my fade. All right, Rich, we always like to open the floor here because we appreciate you coming back, especially for a second time. The first person who's come back for 2 times this year, so we really do appreciate that. So tell the people whatever you want to plug right now in your world, besides, of course, on Twitter, @LordReeves, a great Twitter follow.
Beautiful. I appreciate you guys having me back on. I loved the first time I came on. Glad I got a chance to come back on. You can follow me at Lord Reeves. Hit up all my work at Sharp Football Analysis. We'll be doing playoff packages for DFS picks and player props. And then also from the sports betting side, if you're into that, that's kind of our bread and butter. If you guys follow Warren Sharp, you guys know what he's bringing to the table. He's run ultra hot this year, especially the back half of the season. And his playoff picks historically, he puts everything out. It's transparent. He runs just over a little under 70% in the playoffs. So, come over and, put in a little bit of money that you lost, buying Christmas presents, get it back. But yeah, thanks for you guys extending the invite. And yeah, Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yeah, Rich does a great job. Warren also, Warren Sharp, a great Twitter follow, does a lot of great stuff. And the content you guys have at Sharp Football Analysis, I know we talked about it more the first time, but a great site that a lot of people who are very smart, who you respect out there, they are going to Sharp Football Analysis for their content. Alex, any parting words here before the holidays? This is your last on the contrary of the regular season because you're going to be out after the holiday. So whatever you want to say, the floor is yours, boss man.
Yeah, Rich, thank you for being on the show a second time, man. You bring a lot to the table and really appreciate you coming on here and giving us your analysis. So I also like the part that you mentioned about getting some money for Christmas gifts, because this Sunday might determine how good these Christmas presents will be for everyone that is in my life. So we'll have to really bring the A game this weekend of us playing so that we can afford the top flight Christmas options. Thank you, of course, Fantasy Draft. If I didn't save all that money on Rake, I wouldn't have any money for Christmas presents. Thanks everyone for supporting the show.
We appreciate all you guys for watching. Again, hit that like button, whatever platform you're on, Periscope, Twitch, or on YouTube. Just like it in some way if you can. We wish you guys all a happy and healthy holiday, a Merry Christmas, a happy Hanukkah, a joyous Kwanzaa, a solemn and respectful Ramadan, all of the things out there right now. We hope you guys have a great one. We'll be back next week. It'll be me, Ian Harditz, and Sal Vetri doing the show next week. So the first one we've ever done without Alex. So come on, watch it next Saturday before week 17 gets even stupider. We'll see you guys again soon. Happy holidays. Bye, guys.